Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain, with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should a son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvati Putra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not equal or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight, and so on, until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so on, up to no old age and death, and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom, and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, a mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
Gosu Doji Muju Zudu Su Pinzu Gene Shevi Jubi Gu Ayan Zhubi Rewa Guye Su Mali Xijia Jijin Zibi Shaji Zuwu De Lan Zuwu De Doji Chenpo De Xin Doji Chang Chuzi De Lo Bodan Naru Benju Zhubi Bodan Adi Nyani Xin Lo Ji La Su De Shangbo Tumi Yin Tian Na Zhu De Chu De Du De Dan Shu De Se Zang Ge Sa Lu Ni Su Ni Hua Yao Jin Xu Bi Ji La Su De Liang Yin Yu Mi Shu Ji Du Zhu Da Dao Wan Zhao Bo Rin Bi Gu Zhu Qi San Jue Gu Zhu Hao Ba Yang Se Su San Mo Da Yu Ji La Su De Xie Zhu Da Bi Chang A De Shang Ga Dang De Bi Men Bo Zhu De Nian Jiu Na Xie Gu Qi Su La Su Ga Dang Na Ma Na La Su De Hang Jie Xin Di Zi Ji Zong Ga Gu Mo Do Ri Bi Wo Shu Jie Ca De Dou Guan Di Bi Da Bo Qi Zhu De Yao Zi Ji Bo Jie La Su De Jie Wo Gun Du Yang Da Na Ma Da Zhi Bin Qi Ji Bi La Xi Qi Sa Da Na Ji Yin De Jiao Song Gun De La Ma Du Ji Chang An La Gang De Xin Yin Cui Song De Qiu Da Tu Mo Gu Zhu Zi Zi Bi Zhi Qi La Ma Na La Su De Rang Jiao Song Rou Kun La Da Ye Bi Ye Zang Ta Ba Zhi Bi Jiao Mo Jiu Zi Bi Qi Bi Da Ge Zi Ba Ye Sun Zui Xin Nian Na La Su De Jie Wo Gun Du Yang Da Na Ma Da Zhi Min Qu Ji Bi La Nong Xi Qi Sa Da Na Ji Yin De Ra Zhu De Du Ji Chang Ge Gu Nian Da Yin Shu San Jie Qi Da Zu Ji Zhang Da Na Da Jiu Bo Du Da Ne Jiao Zu Da Ge Qi Ji Zhi Bi Zu Da Ji Zhuo Le Bin Xie Sang Jian Zhu Guan Shu Sang Jie Qi Da Zu Ji Zhu Da Shang Qiu Bo Du Da Ne Jiao Zu Da Ge Qi Ji Zhi Bi Zu Da Ji Zhuo Le Bin Xie Sang Jian Zhu Guan Shu Sang Jie Qi Zu Ji Zhu Da Na Shang Qiu Bo Du Da Ne Jiao Zu Da Ge Qi Ji Zhi Bi Zu Da Ji Zhuo Le Bin Xie Sang Jian Zhu Guan Shu哎呀，给你们要不过啥？哎呀，当我去查检那一节，那去年就完了，通过公路决定把生了。
So, as usual, receiving the teachings, it is important to set our motivations.
哎呀，当我去公路决赛的公路决赛个啥子？对见那个有点不特别好不啦？你哪里这边他们有个人的职业让你对见那个来没把钱。
So now, in order to set our motivations, we must visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the space at the level of one's forehead, surrounded by all those great Lam Rim teachers, the lineages of the Lam Rim teachers, masters.
네, 랑 돼서 될 단단 가서 소소소 대비서 지게서 메시아제. 네, 랑제. 네, 랑게 된도 랑게 전체 범한테 랑게 타고도. 네, 선제다 대화되지 동행면 돼 봐. 네, 랑다 지송해 봐제. 네, 대다게 네, 저도 레와초선은 되는 주변 아마 되다 이마 해봐제. 네, 경로주에 이마.
And then being yourself in presence of those presence of the Buddhas and great teachers of lineage teachers of the Lam Rim. So it's not only that you're only one individual, such as oneself, is in the presence of those great beings, but rather one must visualize entire sentient beings, including one's parents and so forth, or you are surrounded by all those sentient beings. And just as we imagine that, just as we ourselves, long to achieve happiness and overcome suffering, so too, all those beings who are in your surrounding have a similar wish to achieve happiness and overcome suffering. So this is the purpose why we are visualizing Buddhas and all those great masters and being yourself in their presence. And so it's a main purpose is to now receiving the teachings of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment for the benefit of all other beings. So let's take 2 to 3 minutes to meditate on. With this appropriate motivations, the teachings that we are receiving today is Sasam Gidame, which is the lamp for 3 realms, namely the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. So, to begin with these teachings, it is always appropriate to begin with those 4 main headlines or the topics or the outlines. So the first outline is as many of you know, that is the Chukung Sumpa temperature, which means the greatness of the others, given in order to give to show that the teaching has a noble source.
이번에 당가라 기바집이 취지 채와스 당가라 가보인비 된다라 취대 내가래 세대로.
So then the second outline is showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the instructions of the teachings.
아니 다소말라니 니 저완인들이 취대라니 뉘뇽에 가는 요구를 힘에 가르쳐 그러니 시지다시 봐.
So then the next is how to listen to the teachings in which both the teachings and its others are great, and how to listen and how to explain. That is the
아야 다들 저다는 거좀 gemba 강가 친구들 가서 강 gem바로 와. 그 gem바데 쳔바 쳔네. 사제도는 고아해봐 제거다 고아 된다지.
So for now receiving the teachings, as all of us now have been received the Lam Rim teachings for long time, so we must have those outlines memorized and to be able to know that elaborate a little bit about each of those outlines.
아, 죽은 가서 당화를 기바치 주제 저와 니 저와니다 좀 니시 제다시 이래 봐. 다스다지 제바데 담방은 저놈아 제다지 이래 봐세디 자중데 담방은 니 너마 가르치네 지그래 세대로.
So then the most important outlines is the fourth one, which is the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught that the actual instructions or the actual teachings.
이게 된다라 소속이 카톡 라리치모 노이 소속이 카톡 개체셔와이나 아니 이거선다 투모의 랑지 림발라 림바제나 산제서바다 지그리 이거선다 투모의 랑 림바진데 지그러서나 다다디게 사제디게 하란테로로 이거선다 투모의 랑지 림발라 이거선다 투모의 자체냐로 아니 가서 대바치면 가서 쓰르지는 이거선다 투모의 랑지 림발 rinji jene chiguyore sete ni shangchu langji rinpa ki deja chisi dere sadao shaayina.
So those outlines actually indicates how the practitioners are led to the stages of the path to enlightenment by how the individual or how the practitioners to embark upon those the path of three scopes, or the common path of the three scopes.
대시에서도 되니 배나 tempo tu bien bonere joji pade hadishanere tanda ni shangcho langje rimba songa sai jongge khasa ki chino ki rimba de soso ki go chi lo.
So if you're able to know this, and then you will have a proper understanding of how the practitioners must embark upon the spiritual path in a proper sequence. So it is not only just to answer the question to others when someone asks you the question, how do you actually embark yourself on the stages of the path of enlightenment, but rather it must be sequentialized within one's mind, and it is ready, and it's always one must make those ever ready within one's continuum, how one can really embark upon the stages of the path to enlightenment in a proper sequence.
launch our senior deputy, the 10 Lochita Janibani is it. Taking a party shego.
So now let's go through this two, again, another important outlines and rest outlines, and I will be reading through it. So we don't have to go through that, but I will be reading through it. And so the first, what it says, the most important, there are two more important, outlines are the relying upon the spiritual teacher, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and having relied upon the teacher, how one can train one's mind by following the teachings of the teacher.
Yeah. The Shiva Jeda, what can you do good and don't carry him, but she and Rama, Combat Jabo and a combat Junshid over there, so the teacher.
So it is just like, once you are able to have those outlines within your mind, then you are able to explain, or you're able to know that how you will be practicing, how you will be embarking yourself on the path, on the spiritual path. Just like someone, the architects, who already can conceptualize what kind of house or whatever that the architect is building, without prior to his actual building of the particular whatever that needs to be built, he or she has this, he or she can conceptualize and expressed how to build it.
Yeah, that was such a Roshago, that again, Masona.
So now Rinpoche said he will be going through those all those outlines, so no translation is needed.
That's a balance, and I'll just watch any technological
So now we are on this particular stage or particular chapter or the particular topics of the stages of the path for the person of great capacity. So how do we consider ourselves as a practitioner of Mahayana, or the Mahayanan practitioner? So this will be, indicated by the first one of the, again here, the topic or the outlines, where it's stated that developing the bodhicitta or the practicing the bodhicitta is a gateway or the doorway or the entrance door to become oneself as a practitioner of the Mahayana. So that's important to know, because how one can, really consider oneself as a practitioner of the Mahayana or the Mahayana practitioner is showing that developing the spirit of enlightenment is the only entrance to Mahayana. This should be understood, and it's also very important because sometimes there are certain practitioners, Buddhist practitioners particularly, would say that the practicing Mahayana or the Mahayana Dharma is not the actual teachings of the Buddha.
다 대전은 주고 담바 세제 코나 된바 세제는 쉐발로 놓지 세제 제다 집이 세제는 쉐발로 성원 니바 동거들 되자 세제는 세제 코나 된바 니 세제 제다 집이 되라 양자이 사지 시리 니 조강나 되네 제바 아니 세장이 바 집이 니 조가서 와서 다 디노는 가서想去给三项别人吧那个那个看都得想去给三项人吧看都得来了
So we are on the particular chapter of how to practice, the stages of the practice of practice to develop bodhicitta, how to develop bodhicitta.
啊呀，当我最近的老舅舅，你想去给三项最得了你月了哇生，当我看都给这些呢，想去三项最得了你月了哇生了的。
So as we are all by now familiar, or should be familiar with, is when speaking about practicing on the developing, a bodhicitta, and there are two instructions that we find in that, right?
哎呀，但你呢？你得看这些什么现在就老说呢，主要就把这阿德乡的级别，你真正明白的嘛当，你就是小了一种的行为，你想去三项别的吧，你这话谁的？你这老就结不当我说。
So one should keep in mind when speaking about the two instructions of how to develop bodhicitta is the one is the instruction given by the Atisha, which is based on 7 cause and effect of developing bodhicitta, and then other is instruction given by Santideva, which is exchanging and equalizing self for others.
Ah, yeah.
So this is how we should actually, build systematically in our mind, and then to ask, which practice that is more suitable and more, conducive for oneself. So we are on the particular chapter of practicing bodhicitta, following the instructions of the Santidevas, exchanging and equalizing self for others. So when we are going through the practice of the instructions by following Atisha's 7 cause and effect instructions, it actually clearly indicates that when speaking about developing or practicing bodhicitta, it's not only for oneself. It actually explains that how important for one's own, enhancement of the development of the bodhicitta is to include all sentient beings within one's practice. So it is not as sufficient or appropriate for one to practice bodhicitta just by one's own self. So if we think about our relationship with others, just think about our particular life, at this present life. And most of us know that our parents are the most, intimately related to oneself.
Sembate, Jenda Bashu Chimbo, you Tadala, Mashi Tenebo, Zanziroa.
So not only that you have a profound relationship with one's parents, but also if you think about the kindness that is given by other beings, there's no other beings that could be one could be found other than one's own parents when it comes to the intensity of the help that we received from others.
Yeah, Tanga Jung Doida, Tanga to Die in Jugo, the Jansi to Jung inside Missing the Lomago, Corinda.
So now let's go through the text itself, and I'm not going to go through a more general explanation, but rather I will going through the reading of the text itself.
Yeah, Taniba Dodge, yeah, Peshamoloida, Niba Shival Hai Jula Dene Jambala Sole. Dashi Jebi Pia Dama Jebi Nimi Sam, Shunju Le, Sondoa. Hello, what did you to say that? Ah. Ngani Chiba Maroni, the Sonja the Jojel.
Oh, Chiba engaging in the Bodhisattva state, that's you are. Rinpoche is going back. Let's go back to the actual. It is the ability to exchange, I think, self and others. If you accustom yourself to the thought of doing so, exchanging self and others. So we will begin from this again. 52, 51 is exchanging self and others. Chapter 4, I think. Yeah. Did you get it? The training based on the teachings of the conqueror's child Santideva.
Page 51.
Page 51, yes. Page 51, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is one. That do such a such a song to Tombo. Dashi Jes on a pen career, Dashi Majin, the Chen career is.
So this will, let us know how important it is for us to engage in the practice of equalizing self with others and exchanging self with others.
Ah, yeah. That the pen the name in the Shunjules and doing him alone. But we give a letter on the German, the game a lot and Russian and Shelby.
That's all.
Shunjules are. She thought that she had on it. The Joban Dobati, Dot and Shed the Jeshawa, Sanya Tambashiba, Shed on Sodoa.
So here, Rinpoche is reading through the verse in engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds by Santideva. It is under the last paragraphs. It's completing the benefits of exchanging self and others, right? Faults of not exchanging self and others. So under that, where it says, whoever wishes to quickly protect self and others must exchange self for others. Practice this excellent secret. Everyone got it?
Oh, there is. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That is the Nibati the Shed answer. Jitten de Wachiniba taking Jenden de Lesion, Jitten don't hit Jiniba taking any Casa, Jitten don't hit Jiniba taking Daden de Lesion. Kadukwa. Jiten dewa chiniba tekin jenten de leshun, jiten dongen chiniba tekin daden de leshun, manda sheba chigote shiba rangi ten sheba tuba jente tenjeba, teni jenten chiba tos, wade, tuzu jamuro de yansi changudo, de nega tere, tanga suki dongro tere doa.
So here what it says is, and whatever worldly joy there is, arises from wishing for others' happiness, and whatever worldly suffering there is, arises from wishing for your own happiness. So what need is there to say more? Look at the difference between the two. Ordinary person act of their own welfare, and the sage acts for the other's welfare. So this quotation is, often read by His Holiness. His Holiness quote those two verses very often during his teaching.
가사 다데 진제 동에다 양다 제바 마시나 상제년도 면주지 코아나야 대화메 제송바다 다 제반 짐바 규바긴주고 제제반 짐바 빈소 탕체진에서 사모 소에데 데레.
So then here, doesn't really need a further explanation. It's very, very clear in the verse itself. It says that if you do not genuinely exchange your own happiness for others' suffering, you will not achieve Buddhahood. And even in cyclic existence, you will have no joy. Consider how being self-centered is the door. How being self-centered is the door to all sufferings, and being other-centered is the basis of all excellence. So this similar, verse and summarized verse could be also found in the Lama Shepa text, right? So one's own cherishing for the oneself is the doorway to torments doorway to all the torments, and cherishing for the welfare of other beings, and the quality of the basis of all the qualities. It is therefore one must engage in the practice of, engaging in the practice of exchanging self for others.
Yeah.
It's a very clear, so it doesn't really need further explanations. Rather, we will go through the reading of the text itself. So what is lacking for all of us here, including myself? We're not lacking understanding of the meaning of the text. That's not what we are lacking. What is lacking is now we're lacking the actual practice, not only just understanding, but whatever the meaning that you have understood must be followed by actual practice. That is what I think is lacking all of us. So as I always, advise my Dharma friends by saying that it is important that you can write down or jot down the very important verses from Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or some verses from the trainings, mind trainings, and just put it on the wall, just pin it on the wall, and so even whenever you are just walking through, so you can see the verse, and at the moment that you see the verse, it has certain effect on our mind.
다 거기 사진이 말하는 거네 전에 저는 저기 로스 센터 첨부지대 땅 가속이 영에 그런 여 말이 용식을 말해 왔어 나와이나 로드 공부해서는 제거해서 이번 저기 저도
So then, what it actually explains here is now how that could be possible for one to actually develop such a thought, such a noble thoughts of exchanging self for others. How can we really begin with, in other words? So then, therefore, the rest, the text will then explain, if we really engage, practice diligently, if you practice diligently and follow the practice and familiarize yourself with such practice, then that is possible. So it is inconceivable if we were to say that we need to exchange space with earth, exchanging earth and space or the earth and sky. This is something that is inconceivable, right? So here it says now, the ability to exchange self and others, if you accustom yourself to the thought of doing so, right? Take the example of your enemy becoming a friend. At first, when take the example of you, when you heard even the name of your enemy, the fear arose, and later, were reconciled and become such close friend that when this new friend was absent, you were very unhappy. So this reversal result from familiarity your mind with a new attitude. So likewise, if you become habituated to viewing yourself as you presently view others with an attitude of neglect, and to viewing others as you presently view yourself with a cherishing attitude, you will exchange self and others. So therefore, the engaging in a bodhisattva state says, and then here it says, Guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, where it stated that do not turn away from this difficulty, although you are frightened upon hearing someone's name. Now, due to the power of conditioning, you dislike that person's absence. So this is how our parents, our spiritual teachers would always teach us, by saying that one must always put an effort to do whatever one could in terms of engaging in a spiritual practice. It requires a rigorous efforts or enthusiasm, because with great enthusiasm, if one engages in the practice, this practice can be possible. For example, at some point, one particular individual may maybe one's own enemy. And by mere hearing the name of that individual, you become so discomfort, you become so unhappy. Later, that very person that you consider to be your very enemy, at some point you have become so close friend with that person, and very, very dear to yourself, and you have such a enduring feeling for that person. So this is very very possible. So it is only the question of this ability, question of to accustom with such practice. One need to familiarize oneself with such practice.
라바딩에 라이바 맞죠 다신 여지문도 로장기 리더니 슈첨버데 네 가담비 라마 토마라 거슬 고치치도 마도 용타체네 미도아 네 이게 셔주기 세대로 상에 담바 시바샤세데 네 갈래갈래 잖아마 그러니까 소용라 시에마도 뭐보다 엄부시도 너보다 고치기 세대마도 용타 소문도아 그래서 슈체라로.
So this practice previously, those great Kadamba masters have, held very secret. It was not revealed, or is not given. These teachings are not given to general public, because it is not that easy. Because if you give such teachings to the general public, they may not be able to, not be able to conceive or not be able to understand how we can really actually even to begin with such practice. So therefore, in that previously, those Kadamba great masters held this teaching as a secret. So then also, here, let's go through this text. It says, it is not difficult to consider my body with the perspective I have toward others' body. So up until now, we have not really seen ourselves, we have not really understood ourselves, that we are just a visitor on this planet Earth. And our body serves as a guest house for our consciousness. It is our consciousness is a visitor, and it is visiting, and by remaining in our body, so therefore our body is a guest house. This is the way we should be thinking. Unfortunately, we are unable to think in that way. So our way of life, regardless of who we are, if you really examine carefully the way we live on this planet Earth, and when we live with the way we spend our entire life, is by engaging in all kinds of activities to fulfill our 5 senses. That is what we were doing. So therefore, the reason why I'm saying this, our body is like a guest, gets us for our consciousness, is like, because we cannot really be in this, our consciousness cannot be in this body for forever, right? Permanently. That's not what's going to happen. So therefore, it is just like a guest house. So here now, if I could share one short stories of the great masters of the past, who left his body, the consciousness left his body, and the body is contaminated body, which is composed of the blood, bones, and flesh. By leaving this body and departing his or her consciousness, and taking the uncontaminated body, entering into the uncontaminated body, and at the same time, that's able to preserve the old body that is being left behind. But after many years of his departing from that particular body, he or she can then come back to that body as a guest entering into the guest house. So, and particularly the someone who is realist practitioners, particularly the tantric practitioners, this is how they could do. You know, they can leave their body and able to to preserve their body, and then the consciousness can go somewhere else and engaging in all kinds of activities that are beneficial for other beings, and then the consciousness can return to that old body and enter into the bodies and so forth. So one of the primary impediment for our practicing, exchanging self with others is that why should I work for benefit of other beings? In other words, our self-centered attitude or the self-cherishing mind becomes a primary obstacle for development of practicing with self and others, exchanging self with others, sorry. So the problem with us is because when speaking about others, due to our strong grasping at self or strong self-cherishing mind, when speaking about others, we always do not consider ourselves that we are related to those individuals. We have a certain relationship with all other beings, which is such way of thinking and such way of mental attitude is prevented by our self-cherishing mind.
Yeah. So
it's very clear, the one of the reason why we do not think that it's important to exchange practice of exchanging self with others. Here we read through the text where it says, since someone else's body is not your body, how can you develop the same attitude that you have towards your own? Reply, your body was produced from your father's semen and your mother's blood, right? Even though it was produced from a portion of someone else's body, you conceive it to be your own by the influence of the previous conditioning. Similarly, if you become accustomed to cherishing others' body as you presently do your own, you will view it with the same perspective that you now have towards your own body. Engaging in the bodhisattva state says. So they're engaging in the bodhisattva state says. Therefore, just as you conceive I with respect to the drops of semen and blood of others, so you can be conditioned to cherishing others as you do yourself. So here, let's take a break for 15 minutes. More like it, more than that. Just damdul sani di konson nalinda ge lomye kansi che sarawati. Trageto nangyoda. Odi di tanda morandi lomye chebe kan yinsungdu. Terumshi shiro chesa.
Terebe. Peme siya boyo la da geke che de na nyangyo da chanto yenge ro di ga pe che thombo le do ka sen che zo ge de jangmo ro che ge ka se song che ge go ji jeng de choba de le do di ka sen ge de so ge oman ju bi ko le ya zhuo dang de se da da pa pe de shong chen mo lo che ge rang zhuo dang do pe nyang ga chen mo la da.
So Rinpoche said it's a really good, a wonderful decision to take a class from such a great teacher. It's not only just an intellectually, a scholar, but who studied and who practiced, and that's a really good teacher. And this is the group who actually sponsored His Holiness, requested His Holiness for Umajupa teachings, the teachings of the Middle Way last time. And Rinpoche said that he was watching the way they ask the questions. It's a really good question, and it really indicates that they have really gone through a deep studies of particularly of the Middle Way.
That's 다행이다. 당한 좀 좋으다. 단지제. 네, 되죠. 당한 저기 루버 나 저기 다다 현실의 예와시의 내의 루버의 그 루버의 예와시가 나왔어. 이게 매제다기 루버의 카가를 날 가르치는 게 피게 되다. 네, 로봇 제거래. 계시는 알도 지금 말이라나.
So normally when we differentiate ourselves with others, right? We do so by differentiating based on differences of one's own body, because my body and others' body are different. So based on that differences, we look at ourselves different from others. We make a difference between self and others. It's based on mere, reflection upon our body. So therefore, why should I help others? What is the purpose and what makes that it's important for me to help others?
되지. 아니, 천하기 유리에서인데 천하기 다보저데 리지도 와스. 근데 저는 되게 리데 샤다 차기 리로 샤타를 주비리. 근데 이 샤다 차디 천하기 샤타 말에 메제다지 샤타기 차시로 와스. 카두케션 데레도.
So if we ask this question, directly to ourselves, if this is the case, the way you are making distinction between oneself and others is based on only by one's own body, then the very body that we have here, which is composed of, blood and flesh, and our body is not really, coming into being from ourselves. It is received from someone else. The blood and the fleshes are, received from someone else to form the body of ours.
변화가 좋대로와 변화가 좀 컴바지는데 소소 가고 컴바지는 이런 거 되잖아. 컴바지 가고 많이 컴바스는 자치면 쉬우지그러. 그 가르 진짜 이런 거데 마데노로 다 하스데 나서 지면 지고 쉬우지어래다서 컴바지를 세워야 진지요. 컴바이너를 같이 못 하던 거도.
So just like we have attachment towards our house or the home or the place where we have stayed for a very long time, and this is a really wonderful place. I like to be in this place because I've been here for a long time with no problems and so forth. And similar feelings that individual may have towards one's own, vehicles, cars and so forth.
디스디 진세 가르서는 공부하다 이런 건 집이 진세네. 될 사치면 제거여레스. 얘나 이 요거데 파주는 현다지를 전하기 이런 것도 사치면 공부하셔서 예빠도 다른 사치면 증여가 제거레스. 될 하자대로.
So this is, indicates that because you have such a sense of close feeling, sense of closeness and sense of connectedness with certain places and cars and so forth. And it is because you are accustomed your mind and you are familiarized yourself with such place or car and so forth. And similarly, if you're able to practice, exchanging with self with others, and this similar feelings can be generated within oneself, not just considering oneself as important, but one will also able to look at others equally as important as oneself.
당가 속이데 가제되게 조바데 파미 콘랄레 조바데 나 미세게 최 나체세 계속해서 말은 무슨 시루로아.
Our body, when speaking about our body received from someone else's, someone else, that is not a question of dharma. It is right, isn't it? We all know that our body, the structure of our body, is actually the source of our body is from someone else, isn't it?
단 드리게 풍부되니 치료되게 메타동에는 서울에 바위에는 그 세부 세자를 코드 제와는 코드 된자민도 세부 세자로.
So then the body that we have here is not permanent. That's also we know, right? Although we are not really reflecting on that impermanent part of our physical body. Yes, it is it's our body, but doesn't last very long. And when one is passed away, and when one's consciousness depart from this body, and this body will be cremated, right?
로장 유케지시에서는 저러게 나버져야 충다시라고 알아. 저러게 나버져야 돼. 계속면도 미유대 충다시. 걔를 이상하게 나버져서도 저러게 미유대 첨부 연구를 대화대 수첨부 연구. 저러게 뒤에 주지는 저로도 펜도면도 해야 돼.
So what this particular passage is advising us is to now our objective is very, very limited, because cherishing only for oneself, right? It's very limited. So therefore, why don't we expand our objective and make it bigger? Instead of maintaining this self-centered attitude by the attitude of cherishing only oneself, then why don't you just expand that attitude for this attitude of cherishing for welfare of other beings?
맞게 내가 시에고에 가르쳐서 로상이 희우디 로긴 지나게 따와도 휴치수 나온 것들라고 하면도 홍보대 사고 말에 통고 말에 홍보대 유쇼 팬하고 말에 스케치 말어. 홍보대 배조도도 너도도 라이 되와. 대시에고마도 뺀 걸로 쓰겠다.
So here it's very important to understand that when speaking about this body is not permanent and it can be left behind when one's consciousness is departed and so forth. We're not really talking about we should neglect this body. Of course, we have to cherish our body. We have to live long and to really continue on our spiritual practice. So what we are suggesting here is now. We're suggesting here that the main suggestion here is not to have a clinging towards this body or grasping towards this body, and should not have a wrong conception of this body.
되지. 되면은 배 농계 차고로 아니 가서 대지 조지 상이 비리대라 그래. 근데 제 세통질로 손주기 고번이에게 리대된 데를 하바 제만 라기라기라 코펜도 말 계시는 농계 차고로.
So therefore, if you then think about this body is not something that is beneficial, if you keep neglecting our body, then that is contradictory to the teachings of the Buddha itself, right? Because by obtaining such a human body is said to be obtaining the leisure and fortune, the life of human life of leisure and fortune, endowed with leisure and fortune. So not only that, but also having obtained such a body, have ability to achieve Sungjuki Gopang, which means the state of unity. In other words, a state of complete enlightenment within this lifetime by means of having this body. So therefore, we're not completely saying that we should neglect this body. That's not what we were talking about here.
이 고아들 내는마도 배낭 아주 상주기 생에는 dimba니 되거로 라니 조장 던데 주고 제거래. 이 정으로 이제 라시 되네로 주시세더라. 라시 니가게 되도가 인선 매포서 셔야지 통주통한테 계시지는 말어. 고아들 말려나 몰로지기도.
So this is how we should always think, because there might be a chances of having a misunderstanding when speaking about the body is not permanent and so on and so forth, and it is composed of blood, flesh, and so forth. So if you look at our practice of bodhicitta, it talks about the two aspirations. The bodhicitta consists of two aspirations: aspiration to gain state of enlightenment and aspiration to working for the welfare of other beings. Right? There are two aspirations. One is to work for the welfare of other sentient beings. One is to gain the state of enlightenment for oneself. And one's very purpose of gaining state of enlightenment is to working for the welfare of other sentient beings. So then also His Holiness always mentioned that Ranjan Dunyi Rabdukchiro, which means when getting in such practice, the practice must become working for the purpose of oneself and others.
안데로 가서 그때 고알래도 그래. 변화 소소로 변도 너무 짜침부 쉬우지어서는 처럼이 너무 짜침부데 처럼 찍고 있다가 풀었던 마샤. 요즘 또도 로선의 집에 지장 로도 대래 용수 조박이 된다는 로선도 당시와 이나시 데로와.
So just like take a simple example that if individual owns a very precious jewel, so instead of keeping this jewel and used by only one individual, why don't such a precious jewel has the ability to fulfilling the wishes of all beings, many other beings? Why don't we just try to utilize those jewels for the purpose not only for oneself but also for the other beings?
예신주기 논담한테 하고 그러와. 근데 선제 전전에 지지대 집에 가서다 가서 토마 내번에 가서 녀도 갈래 저이 봐스. 근데 선제기 노부 배저 동도데 땅에 코로나 상제서도 가서 갈래 저는 집어 요나서는 갈래 떠나데 저셔래다. 데비지에 태우면도 와. 괜히 전에 집어들어서.
So we can see the differences if you think about the Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha was ordinary beings like ourselves in the beginning, right? We all are same individual. We all were same individual at one point, was taken rebirth within the samsaric existence as a samsaric beings. But then what happened? The difference that made was because he knew how to use his jewels, how to utilize his jewels. So whereas we did not know how to use our jewels, we kept this jewel for ourselves and thinking for working only for the welfare of our own self, and that is why we got stuck here. So it's if you really put in effort, result is possible. It's all requires a rigorous efforts to practice, and our practice of Dharma is not something that is baseless, nor it has a fruitless. It is nor it is fruitless. Rather, it has a solid basis. Also, give rise to a fruition, which is the state of happiness.
Tēnā ngā tsū chūshū kēchā shē kō mā rē, ngā tsū kē sēng jī sē chā lā ngā tsū dū rū mā tō yā rā rō gu mē tō wā. Nē ngā tē rō, ngā tsū kē sēng jī sē rī kō lā jīpa tē kē kēnyī tē kā tē yu nē tēng kō yu shā wā. Tā tō mā nē tē kēnyī tē sē kē tēng jā nā, tā tā kē nē kō lā sēng jī sē rī tē sē chā lē kō yu sō rī chē, tē mē tō wā.
So for us, it's now our clear light mind is completely, covered by the layers and layers of our negative thoughts and emotions, not letting this clear light activate, not letting this clear light actually manifest. In fact, we keep adding the layers on layers, layers after layers, and making it so thick so that the magnificence and the radiance of the clear light cannot be actually revealed. So this is what is happening. So what is suggested here is now we must understand that we have such a a precious jewel within us. So one should not be keeping those jewels without utilizing it. Try to listen those layers stage by stage and let this clear light manifest.
아니야, 당연히 배서 로기다게. 다 단지 상상 로기다.
So just reading through the text again here.
아고 사진 좀 제나 단지 그 도도 제는 내려도 다신년지 강비 편에다 막 가서 다신 집이 편에다 막 집이 예미세에 지지.
So we began from that text, right? Earlier, the training based on the trainings of Santidevas, but completing the benefits of exchanging self and others, and the faults of not exchanging self and others, and benefits of exchanging the self and others. So then the next it's suggested that the ability of exchanging self and others, if we accustom yourself to the thought of doing so, it is possible. So if this is possible, then how can we really begin ourselves with? What is the practice that is required to be able to, engage in such a practice? So this will then be, explained in next paragraphs. So we will go through this reading, going through the reading of the text now. So it's the teachings, if you look at the Lam Rim teaching, it's not something that is stanza by stanza, but rather it's a very detailed explanations of from one stage to another stage, how we can really build our practice in a very proper sequence. Just like as someone who made a food available, and then you can just go there and just eat it. And then only thing is that how you begin to eat this. That is the question.
렌사로도 소소 마치 바네 자체지 나오네 레라나 디노라고 말도 신라고 말해.
So there, His Holiness, whenever he gives the teachings, the importance of practicing bodhicitta and perfect view of emptiness, right? So now, just as when His Holiness, gave these teachings, we are all listening to it, but then we are not really engaging in the practice of developing bodhicitta and developing the perfect view of emptiness. It was now what is important for us is to know, don't just take it as an intellectual exercise. Don't just take it as an intellectual understanding and leave it on the level of intellectual itself. Rather, try to bring them onto the emotional level and try to mingle those teachings that you have understood, the meaning that you have understood, with your own emotion and mind, so that you can change yourself and you will experience the result of your practice.
또들 배샤고로 변에 상추생기 준신선다. 돈벌이기 준신. 그 준신세대 단도 정으로 되게 준신 코로야 보이면 시거를 마도 사변 두스 따고리 칠리 두스 로고레 콜런지 좀 두스 제거레세 시에 당해마도 못 보면 계속 되세네와. 근데 인지미지 소소 단대전에 파지 버는 인지미지 소소기 또바지 예바데 제고 요소나 인지미지 정도리지는 주고래. 늘지는 지네 라녀도는 방지고.
So therefore, wish-fulfilling trees of bodhicitta, His Holiness always say that, wish-fulfilling trees of the bodhicitta must be planted, and one must understand the seeds of that wish-fulfilling tree, and how can we take care of those seeds so that the seeds can germinate into sprouts, and sprouts can give rise to its fruitions and so forth. So this is our, responsibility to how to really to implant the seeds of the bodhicitta and how to take care of that and how and let this very seed of bodhicitta germinate into the sprouts and its fruits. And the sixty you're not sorry, Michelle, and the 60 chiputin, and the 가수를 뒤에봐 전주기 세대 또 스케업 나서 림치게 뒤 잘로 나서 뭐 타기 티볼을 켜긴가 진짜 버터스 디지털
알로에다 대다 표현다 님이 레바 삼반에 이 타반에 대다 강화라 조슈 제바 공부하시나 제뉴바양 통화대 다시 제비
So let's read through the text here again. Reflect thoroughly on the benefits of being other-centered and the faults of being self-centered. Thereby, you will produce from the depth of your heart a great delight in meditating on the exchanging of self and others. Then recognize that you can actually generate it once you have become habituated to it. So here now, we should put an effort and we should have an enthusiasm of engaging in practice, right? So that's this enthusiasm, we are really referring to the enthusiasm of delightful feeling towards engaging in the practice of the Dharma. That is the kind of enthusiasm that we are talking about. That is the kind of effort that we are talking about.
단지 편 다시 제소나 편 들지도 마가는 이미 들지도선 로기 편의 통용이 편 가보도 통 조슈도 편용으로 와. 아니 조슈 페비토네니 랭거베데 제가 온보네보게도 따라오니 내가 가르치는 주고여서나 다시 전에 주면버지 통하네 네 샤워를 주거든 아니 리파다 데비 강사기 주동.
So when you understand the the benefits and the faults of not engaging in the practice of exchanging self with others, and the benefits of engaging in the practice of self with others. Then when you think about the benefits of engaging in the exchanging self with others, then you will be delighted. If you are genuinely, see that there's a benefit by engaging in such practice, then you will be delighted. The very delightful, delightful feeling and the delightful attitude will then, induces a genuine enthusiasm of engaging in this practice.
야. 다 다시 거기 추기 리바데 간데 진도선에 뭐 로인다 니제. 다시 제시바데 된다데 시우도 다시 제시바 당사. 시바 당사. 다 젠도 샤시 젠다데 샤시 숨바네 젠라 나오 냐도 당. 디 미라 소바 나이 오냐비 로장바 민지 rāngla jebam zimba dāng zhēn yawa tōbi lōni wasa jēde zhēn la rāngda jebam zhēn zhēn la zhēn da yawa tōbi māde rāngla zhēn da yawa tōbi lō jeba o tere dāshēn jebi ngō jēse na kāntē chile sēgu dēse na.
So now here what it really explains here is how we can really begin with engaging in practice of exchanging self with others. Here it begins by saying that in the guide in the Lam Rim text itself, we're saying the stages of meditating on how to exchange self and others, right? Where it says the phrase exchanging self and others and making oneself others and others oneself do not indicate a turning in the attitude which thinks that I'm others or others, I's, and etc. are mine. That's not what we were thinking about, right? Here now, it says they indicate a change in orientation of the two stages of the mind of cherishing yourself and neglecting others, wherein you develop the attitude of cherishing others as you presently do yourself and neglecting yourself as you presently do others. That is what it's meant.
네. this 세보 세자 세보 시위도 이제 되게 적음이도 그 제목으로 계속해 말해 삼바 제목으로 그세더라. 삼바 단다 발랑아 되는 소소소소를 카랑라 돈의 상한지 다운하러 제세들 따당 가르치. 근데 소소선은 따당 가르치도 무슨 뭐 알레 제네 라레 추라레 무도 어때. 소소네 당고라 에스 신주 지잖아.
So here now it's very clearly mentioned that when speaking about the practice on how to exchange self and others, it's not that we are physically exchanging yourself with others. This is not, however, it's not so. This is not a practical. This is not a reality. This is not going to happen. What is exchange self with others? It's exchanging our attitudes of self-cherishing and the cherishing of the welfare of other sentient beings. This is the way of thinking, the way of thought, of attitude must be changed.
또 누워서 이렇게 말해듯이 마치 젠세디 여어ton에 두자래 지유쇼지 이거 두자 이거 쇼세 되다 뉴뉴로와 얘나에 라니 데나세 라니 지고주는 데나세게 라데 밸런스적으로 요래 지지로.
Although the one may not have as such attitude of neglecting other beings, completely neglects, but regardless of what this maybe that other individual may have happened and what kind of situation other individual may face, we may not be not doing such ways in such a way, but we are completely focusing in ourselves and thinking of our own self and our own happiness, working day and night for the welfare of our own self. That is what is happening due to our, strong self-centered attitude.
사바도 다들 소속이 손아들 랑기 대지세대 랑짱발에 대비 소리지 손아여다 랑기 대지 뇌양하게 놓으시 요수조바데 젠라 되는 마도 랑기를 다소 하나 지메와 다소 지체 제체 지메와.
So when we think about the happiness of oneself, and then happiness that one have achieved, we think of that happiness is just achieved by yourself independently. The way we think of how we achieved that happiness, the worldly happiness that we have, is really a contradictory to the reality of the accomplishment of that happiness. We think about, just let's take an example of our happiness. Our happiness is to really to fulfill the desire of our 5 sense organs, right? 5 senses. So the very fulfillment of our desire of our 5 senses are coming into being from others' effort, not by one's own self. It is not we have not acquired such happiness independently. So this is how we should always look at. It is not. I'm not really talking about the Dharma point of view. We don't really need to follow the Dharma practitioner or the religion or so forth. But we can. It is a reality. What is happening in our happiness, the fulfillment of our happiness is dependent upon others. So why we haven't been able to really achieve the result of lasting happiness, in fact, the everlasting happiness, which we all have put in effort to achieve, and we, have put all kinds of efforts and rigorously towards achievement of everlasting happiness, not only for this life alone, from the beginningless time of our life. However, we haven't been able to achieve the result that we long to achieve. Why this is happening? Why we are unable to achieve such a result? So why we haven't been able to achieve the satisfactory result out of our efforts? It is because of our self-cherishing mind. So now, by following the teachings, one should tackle this self-cherishing mind, and then a self-cherishing mind, which is the obstruction for achievement of our result, our desired result. In other words, the lasting happiness. So whenever we engage in the practice and receiving the teachings of the Dharma, we should enter into the teachings. That is what we need to do. Well, it is not simply just your listening and not entering yourself into the teaching. This is not very helpful. It is not very beneficial. Rather, when you are receiving the teachings and when we are engaging in the certain practices, one should, enter oneself into the practice. One should enter into the teachings, the teaching that one is receiving.
내가 제시한테 가르쳐나 소속이 생각도 자체로도 somebody shows over that.
So importance of understanding of receiving the teaching is to expand our mind, broaden our mind, and modify our mind. In other words, transform our mind. This is all about the practicing the Dharma. This is all about receiving the teachings of the Dharma. So then here, let's read through the text. Therefore, Shantideva's statement above that you must exchange yourself, your own happiness. Sorry, you must exchange your own happiness for others' suffering. Means to view cherishing yourself as an enemy, and then to stop emphasizing your own happiness. In addition, you must view cherishing others as a good quality and stop neglecting others' suffering, and instead emphasize the removal of their sufferings. In brief, this statement means that you remove others' suffering while disregarding your own happiness. That's all. So now here the question may ask, why we haven't been able to achieve state of Buddhahood? Why we are unable to enter into the path which leads to the state of enlightenment? So the answer to this question, there are two main obstacles that obstruct us from venturing onto the path to state of enlightenment. One of the obstacles, the main obstacles for our state of enlightenment is the chechen, which is the self-cherishing mind. Self-cherishing mind is the one of the primary obstacles for achievement of our Buddhahood or the enlightenment. And another obstacle is to the self-grasping, grasping at independent self or independent soul. That prevents us from not only achieving the state of enlightenment, but also venturing onto the state which leads to the state of enlightenment. Venture onto the path which leads to the state of enlightenment. Sorry, that's all. So how harmful to oneself of this self-grasping and self-cherishing mind? It's not actually really a question of practicing Dharma. It's not really a question of teachings of the Buddha. It's not a question of Dharma, but it is a reality. Someone who is being so selfish, someone who's being so self-centered, it is not even viewed positively by other beings. People who are there surrounding, isn't it?
But take 좋아도 소설 거다 렌지 맞으리 이제 제비로 도바지 해요 우리 가지 렌 저도는 저도 마도 도바지 해요.
So that this we should always ask this question to ourselves. How the self-centered attitude is it is harmful to oneself. How the self-grasping mind is holding back, why it is not letting us go forward, and what makes this, looked by others oneself as a negative, looks other by negatively. So this is this we should ask this question to ourselves, and we maybe have answer to this question. If not, then we should at least have some kind of doubt inside. Why this self-grasping is really holding back.
yu ngubi netsi tang ge sa so na ngubi netsi mare kelen ko mare lo chu ji ji ni ka de ten de ni la zang ten de ge ra wa le ge sa so na la ne to phen to yo mare de bu yo mare ta jie jiu le de mo de yi jin.
So if one is then follower of the Buddha's teaching, then one should always be realistic. One's approach of teachings must be based on rationale. There should be there should be a ground, what do you call it, a logic. It is not something that if you really follow the illogical way of practice, then result is not possible. If you really go off the track of the reality, then you will not be able to achieve result. So teachings of the Buddha, the followers of the Buddha's teaching must be always remain realistic view.
Tēnā yōngzhō gāngzhō jebā jē tēnrī kī pā chūshū kēchā mā shīwā tē yu tēn tō tsē tēn rōngē jē sō na dēwā sēngē jē tō dōngē sēngē jē yō rī yō mā rē. Yō na dōngē sēngē tē kāntē chēn yō gō rē, dēwā sēngē kāntē chēn yō gō rē, jīmē jēmē rē bē yā sē na shūnchū shū jē gō mā jē gō rō.
So here now, the very simple example of how we can really approach our practice of our spiritual practice, realistically, is think about that. Is there an existence of so-called happiness and suffering? If so, then how the happiness can be achieved? What kind of skillfulness that is required for achievement of happiness, and how one can really overcome these sufferings? What is the causes and condition behind the sufferings? Is the suffering and happiness coming into being, both suffering and happiness coming into being due to no cause or no conditions? So this is, we by asking such question to ourselves, and we are actually, following in a realistic way, approaching a realistic way of practice. In other words.
Tā ngē tē jā shū chēn wā chā rō rē, dēwā sēngē, dōngē sēngē dē yō rē, dēwā lē lū yu dēwā dā sēngē dēwā yō rē, dōngē lē lū yu dē sēngē dē mō yō rē. Nē dēn rō kē lū yu dēwā sēngē dē mē tōng lā sēngē sē tu yā chī chē yō rō wā. Tā sēngē dēwā sēngē dē kā rē chē nē sē gu gu rē sē nē, kē sē shē sō na, nē dēn sā sā nē rō gu rō wā.
So then, when speaking about the suffering and happiness and suffering, and there are also primarily two types: the physical suffering and mental sufferings, and physical happiness and mental happiness. And of course, physical happiness is obvious to all of us. We know that what is happening, what is suffering, and so forth. But when we go deeper, then what is the mental sufferings? How we can tackle this cause of this mental sufferings? This is a more important question that we need to ask ourselves.
Tā tēn rī kē sē shē yō dē, nē kō kē tā mē kē dēwā tsāng rū tō yō rē. Dēn lē lā wā jē nē tā pā kē tā pē dēwā yō rē. Dēn lē tāng chē dēwā rū tō rū sē rē sē nē, shū chū chē chē yō dē, tā tāng chē chē pē dēwā dē rū gu yō na, tā dā shē nyā jī gō nē shāng chū sē chā nē, dēwā rū tō chī sē dē, yā kō rīmbā rō dē, rīmbā sōmbā gō dē lē, rīmbā tō shō dē lē dē wā. Shū bī chā nē.
When we're speaking about achieving happiness and overcome suffering, we're not talking about mere achievement of happiness as a human beings, or taking a rebirth in higher realms and so forth. We're not talking about that. We are talking about the ultimate state of happiness. So then its ultimate state of happiness, not only the happiness of happiness of human beings, happiness of gods and demigods and so forth, but rather everlasting happiness of happiness is achievement of liberation, or the moksha, or dharma, or then further the ultimate state of enlightenment, the complete state of enlightenment is the ultimate state of happiness. So in order to achieve such a level of happiness, such a state of happiness, one must then go through the practice of development of bodhicitta, such as following the instructions of exchange self and others. So it is based on such practice of developing bodhicitta, will then enables one to enter into the practice of Tekpa Chenpo, or the great vehicle, or the Mahayana vehicle, and then will lead oneself to the practice of the Vajrayana.
Oh yeah. Sere tamasung hwa de chegi da tamasung ge de hwa de ni ta ran shi se je ta ji da ka ji ta ji nge se wa na hi ge ni jin zi ni je xian wa de so ne di da da ba de la de xia ne da de nge ni da ba tu bi wo ne ta ran ge ni ka sa jiang wo lo ma song hwa chen bi xiong za chi mo de se la de ne ni jin zi ni ba me ba so go de xie song ni ran ni ji jin zi ni de me ba so na ran shi se je ta ji ni jin zi ni le ta ne ni 타바다 타지진베 고모 타바지 용화쇼 근데 제네 방향되는 시베 아마 산데나 신절로도 소서 아니 뭐하다 하나님과 제다.
Let's do the in the dedications and prayers by imagining that right from the beginning of this time up until now, all myself and all other sentient beings who have remained under the control of self-grasping and self-cherishing mind. Now on, I understood and how I can really tackle those two obstacles. So I will do so by engaging in practice, following the practice of the Buddha, and may all sentient beings and myself be able to overcome the self-cherishing and self-grasping mind and gain the state of enlightenment. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of oneself bless me to be able to do this.
Debe nyebo rendo seje sho sa je bede sho je rendo ro re ro ne je ne de je ba ne sa je shi ro ne de wa ye ro ge no do shi no sho ba sho je wa ge do yang da Jimmy Chudu Bella non Chudu Sada Namju Yade Rodo Doju Changi Gobo Yudo Shu Yudon Guru Nere no Doya Doya Dene Rindo Bene Kado Yamba Kashi Saba Romi Mari Gudon Joan Nandri Jaye Ombo Daju Yama Subi Tsera Kudo Yang Jabe Yangji Tsiri Jizon Tembi Rima Kunsan Nandri Ju Nini Jubi Jina Nishi Rangi Jijin Dobi Nandri Shura Tsebe Changi Tangi Goye Yiji Miba Sesen Yaye Deba Yurin Zinju 莲波人间诸给马中，小将娘把举杯说的，念觉千百一绕这光阴，别的对对三万些光数，三间了于民众之年，列住上主浪子林北。他对那些也那别的心，家园在把人都中就近，马上准备天天出现金，夜间世界我当那边跟，再让更多家园好过瘾，浪这我马就近，刚才天把就那就是近。世界诸老尊宝的原则，多的当知道都出现经，这些将子书跟朝就经，知子老边各自当的，那个陈的书就结果都。罗嗦地比这边上松间，若也面色大多天就见，高楼上面过于西方，别到电话马的中间，现在在我电子叫作业，小别身体不动天就见，两边把人知道结果。更多上坡太阳的前提，也到根据就是大脑是，给我的大堂接肉多，比说西北叫我堂接，我刚了就多过的，大金个月早晚就跟着，从不许是肉多高。OK，对，这样的啊，thank you。